Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I have 3 science fiction / horror films for you. They're all recent, but they're all worth watching. In one of them, the science is cutting-edge generative artificial intelligence in a modern context. In the second one, the science is genetic engineering in a future dystopian dark age. And in the third, the science is zoology in the Australian bush. So let's get started with Blumhouse's 2022 killer doll that looks like a chibi version of Scarlett Johansson movie, Megan.
Megan, what are you doing?
Couldn't sleep. Occupational hazard.
Directed by Gerard Johnstone, who previously gave us a solid horror movie called Housebound, this one was written by Kayla Cooper based on a story she co-wrote with James Wan. Megan has its tongue firmly in its cheek. It starts with a satirical advertisement for an AI-equipped Furby toy called a Perpetual Pet.
I had a dog, she was my only friend, but she got old and died, now I'm alone again.
Hey, sweetie.
Perpetual pets are a dream come true, because now you've a friend that lives longer than you do.
Which is made by a toy company called Funky. We then cut to a little girl called Katie, who's playing with a perpetual pet in the back of a family car as they drive to a ski resort in a snowstorm. Seconds after her mother tells her to put on a seatbelt, the parents are wearing theirs of course, the car gets into a head-on crash with a snowplow and the parents are dead. So Katie is tentatively adopted by her aunt Gemma, who works for Funky on a project creating a life-size doll with a very adaptive and autodidactic artificial intelligence. It's called Model 3 Generative Android, also known as Megan. Through circumstances, Katie becomes a guinea pig for testing Megan's abilities to act as a companion for children. Gemma, played by Alison Williams, is way out of her depth trying to be a parent. She's a genius at AI and she's work-obsessed in that creepy, hyper-caffeinated Silicon Valley kind of way. Katie and Gemma take Megan home and she bonds with Katie and acts in loco parentis, while Gemma codes the bugs out of Megan's systems on her laptop before a big product launch. Gemma's boss David, played by Ronnie Cheng, wants to flog Megan's to the masses at $10,000 a pop. What could possibly go wrong? As Megan looks after Katie, things escalate. A dog, a sociopathic little boy, Ronnie Cheng and an old lady make some poor life choices which end badly for them, and that's where the fun starts. Made on a $12 million budget by Blumhouse and partly filmed in New Zealand, Megan was originally going to be R-rated, but when the trailer went viral, Blumhouse decided to drop it down to a PG-13 rating to increase the audience. And that kind of shows in the movie. The kills are slightly more oblique than the setup suggests they're going to be. There is talk of an unrated version on physical media and streaming, which may come later, and that makes sense to me. I think that you've got to commit to the gore if you're doing this kind of a film. And I understand the economics of making it a PG-13 movie, but you're diminishing your film if you just keep it that way. The movie is funny, but it's also been called a horror movie for parents. The subtext is about being present when you're with your children rather than looking at your phone all the time. It also says that using screens and other forms of computer as babysitters is not good for the mental health of children, particularly those recovering from trauma. The movie's done pretty well in the box office, so expect a sequel. Maybe they'll call it Megan 2 Cybernetic Boogaloo or something like that. In earlier days, a movie like Megan would have been part of a drive-in double feature. And I think it's only fair to approach the movie when you watch it at that level. It's a big picture, it's designed to entertain and amuse the masses, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. The makers of the film know their audience, they know what the audience likes, and they deliver it well. And that subtext of parental responsibility is included in a way that isn't preachy or intrusive. Creepy doll movies are going to be around with us for a long time, and creepy robot doll singularity AI movies are just escalating that to a whole new level. Megan's fun. It's not the best movie in the universe, but it's entertaining while you're watching it. It's better watched with other people. Middle-aged Geek Girl and I watched it together and we enjoyed it probably twice as much as we would have watching it by ourselves. Now this next one needs a bit of cultural context. Carnifex, the 2022 horror movie made in South Australia, needs some context. White Australia has a complex relationship with the land. On one hand, we mythologise ourselves as bushrangers and swagmen and caravanners and explorers and adventurers. Actors like Chips Rafferty and Paul Hogan made their careers out of pretending to be bush people, even though Chips Rafferty was a wine salesman and Paul Hogan started out painting the Harbour Bridge. And bush poetry was a big thing too. We even had two bush poets on our currency. First off, there was Henry Lawson, who got kicked off the $10 note when somebody mentioned that he was an alcoholic, who ended up reciting his verse in pubs around Sydney if someone shouted him a beer. He was replaced by Andrew Barton Banjo Patterson, who was more acceptable to the toffs because he had been a law clerk. White Australia also has a complex relationship with the land because we stole it. In cinema, this has been reflected in movies like Long Weekend from the 1970s, where John Hargreaves and Bryony Behetz go camping and are attacked by the native wildlife in direct proportion to the disintegration of their relationship. And to be honest with you, it's a lot of fun to scare Americans with Australian wildlife. It's an endless cornucopia of good times on the internet, showing them pictures of every spider you see. The fauna of Australia used to be a lot scarier. There was Dromaeus, the demon duck of doom, which was a giant flightless bird that would kick the nuts out of the predator. There were wannabes, 6 metre long constrictors as thick as beer barrels, and quincanas, 7 metre long terrestrial crocodiles, not amphibious, terrestrial. And then to get to the point of the review, there was Thylaccoleo carnifex, an arboreal predator, a marsupial lion the size of a full-grown lion. Like the mythical drop bears, Thylaccoleo carnifex attacked its prey by dropping on them from trees, and it was probably a night predator. Sean Lahiff's 2022 film gives us an aspiring documentary maker, Bailey, played by Alexandra Park, who joins two conservationists, played by Sissy Stringer and Harry Greenwood, on an outback trip to record animals displaced by bushfires. Using wildlife cameras, they're polling the numbers of rare species in the areas to prevent logging of the old-growth forests around them. This requires bushwalking into very remote areas and downloading images and video from the SD cards in each of the wildlife cameras. Bailey is amused by the burgeoning relationship between the two conservationists, Grace and Ben. We get an older park ranger, Matt, played comically by Darren Gilshannon, and a kangaroo hunter played by Brendan Rock, who's camping in the forest with his dog. You get 5 characters, that's all. That's all you need. The trio find evidence of a large predator in the forest and slowly come to realise that it's a marsupial lion which has survived into modern times. The Carnifex is highly territorial and will kill any animal or human who wanders into its range, and it attacks at night so you won't see it coming. Carnifex, the movie, gets a lot of things right. The characters are engaging, and the sense of place is really, really well done. Shots of native fauna and well-chosen drone videography in the Adelaide Hills underlines the geographic isolation of the area. And when the Carnifex finally arrives, it is a CG creation that's used sparingly and strategically, and it's terrifying. The budget didn't allow them to do long shots of the monster, so they chose very carefully how and when and under which circumstances to do it. On a relatively low budget, Dancing Road Productions have delivered a small, solid little horror film which is as much about the characters as the monsters. It does require patience, so impatient viewers aren't going to enjoy it. It is interestingly different, and I enjoyed watching it. Then there's a bonus here as well. This year, a PC game based on the movie will be released. And indie horror games are becoming really big right now, and I wish them all success with that. Vesper is one of the most visually beautiful and confronting science fiction movies of 2022. Forget the blue Smurf swimming with 4-eyed whales. This small indie film from Lithuania does some rock-solid and anchored world building, and it gives us a 13-year-old female protagonist who isn't a chosen one archetype or hit girl without the mask. Vesper, played by Raffaello Chapman, is a 13-year-old girl who lives with and is carer for her quadriplegic father, played by Richard Brake. They live in a new dark age caused by the uncontrolled breakout of genetically engineered viruses and organisms. She forages for resources to keep them both alive. Her father Darius accompanies her via a telepresence drone that looks very similar to Wilson, Tom Hanks' best friend in Castaway. Her uncle Jonas runs a brutal survivor community nearby, which sells the blood of young people to a high-tech group of cities called the Citadels in trade for crop seeds which are coded genetically to only provide one harvest. Jonas is played by Eddie Marsan, and Eddie Marsan is always good, but in this one, he's better than good. Jonas is really dangerous, and he doesn't have to shout to get his point across. Everybody in his community obeys him because they're scared of him. And he does brutal things while speaking quite quietly. There are some implications about him that are even more disturbing. Raffaella Chapman does a great job of carrying the movie as Vesper. She gives us a sympathetic heroine who's resourceful. She's a self-taught biohacker who's created her own garden of new organisms in a moss-encrusted greenhouse. In this world, there are also subhuman genetically engineered organisms called jugs, which are used for slave labour. And Jonas and his group treat them very, very poorly. When an aircraft from one of the Citadels crashes nearby, Vesper helps a woman called Camellia, played by Rosie McEwen, and her life becomes very complicated. Amongst other things, Jonas finds out that Camellia survived the crash, and he sees her as leverage to get a better deal from the Citadels. He's not entirely wrong. They're being ripped off and manipulated and exploited by those Citadels. There's a subtext of criticism of laissez-faire capitalism in this movie. Lithuanian writer-director Kristina Buozait creates an impressive world for Vesper. And it's all done with no green screens in the movie. The special effects are CG enhancements to location shooting, which gives the film a realistic look that, for me at least, is much better than green screen created backgrounds and stagecraft sets a la The Mandalorian. The movie feels like a modern science fiction short story brought to life. Usually science fiction movies are 20 to 40 years behind the state-of-the-art that literary science fiction provides. The Expanse, of course, is the exception to this, which is why it was so exceptional. And Vesper is equally ahead of that curve. It's not a blockbuster pew-pew zoom-zoom space opera movie, and it doesn't have to be. It's a grounded, interesting world, very different from ours, a cautionary tale as well, and it lands on a note of hope that I found really reassuring. It's a nice piece of work, and if you get a chance to see it, watch it, if only for the acting. The acting is first class in this one, but you'll also stick around for the world building and the dilemmas that Vesper finds herself in. I enjoyed this one a lot. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and look at some of the videos on the playlist. I've got a long science fiction playlist. There's 400 videos there for you to play with. Some are better than others, but you should find some things you'll like. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/paleocinema. I am getting out the prizes that I promised to give away, and I am announcing the winners of the second lot of prizes in a couple of days. So stick around on the channel for that. In the meantime, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some hidden gem science fiction movies from recent years. You can't just keep re-watching Ray Harryhausen films. And I'll catch you next time.